Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. It's really weird working out how to start these videos at the moment. Last year, if Spurs had been on a run of 3 defeats, I would probably not only be sighing so deeply, it would be kind of quite disturbing, but I would also probably be ranting and raving and essentially just taking shots at everyone involved with the football club. Whereas right now, you know, yesterday I've come out of a stadium where Spurs have lost their 3rd game in a row. I don't feel that I can go that mad about it. So if you're here for me kind of ranting and raving, this is not going to be that kind of video. There are bits and pieces that we can talk about that need to be a lot better, of course. But I kind of felt like with everything that's happened to Postecoglou and his team, with everything they were fighting against as well as the opposition, I mean, they've got 11 players, 11 senior first team players, an entire team of players out right now. Yet he still managed to get them playing some of the best football I've seen at Spurs this season and probably in recent seasons. It's so difficult because, there's stuff that we can absolutely kind of delve into and see why it happened and what went wrong, and there's some blame to be handed out. Of course, there always is. But I just feel like maybe we're in that stage where Celtic fans were in 2021, when after Postecoglou had come in, quite early on they were getting quite iffy results. But the Celtic fans weren't really, from what I can gather, getting too concerned or angry about it, because they could see what was happening. They could see the kind of football being played and they knew where it was going to take them. And I don't know whether it's others share this view. It might just be me, but I think I'm going on maybe the stadium atmosphere where, had that been the 3rd defeat in a row, not only would it have been boos at halftime, there'd have been boos at that final whistle like you wouldn't believe last season. Whereas this time around, not only was there no booing, but also after the 2nd Villa goal went in, Spurs fans really kind of roused themselves and the stadium and the team and everything and were trying to push them on again. It's just created such a different atmosphere right now around the team. And obviously it's all very Postecoglou-led. But yeah, I think that's maybe where we're at. The first 10 games of the season were so, the results were superb. Spurs on top of the table. And I think maybe that masked a lot of the process that was going on in the background. Obviously, we spoke about it, so it didn't hide it entirely. But I do kind of feel like now we're in that stage where Postecoglou told everyone, it's happened at every club. He's always said there's a period where this happens. And not only is it about the fans not losing faith of where they're going and the belief in where they're going, but maybe even more key is the players. And if the players worry that the style is not going to bring them success. Whereas I think certainly what we've heard from them since that game yesterday, you could really feel that they knew what they were doing was the right way to play. It was the right way to bring a positive result. And let's be honest, I think the reason I'm probably less annoyed by it all is the fact that had Spurs taken some of their chances in that first half, Villa would have been buried in a landslide of goals. Honestly, there were so many chances, especially in the first half. Second half, there were more, though. I mean, you've got to just look at that team, I guess, and see what he did was very impressive. And I know this sounds weird, and those people that absolutely hate any positive stuff to come out of defeats, and I get that. It's a winning mentality, all of this sort of stuff. But if you look at that team that was out there against Aston Villa, 4 fullbacks playing as a back 4, 4 wingers, and a midfield trio that I don't think had ever started a game together. Let me think, who are they? Sorry, not started together as a trio is probably the best way to put it. Actually, no, I don't think they'd ever started together. Because for Lo Celso, that was his first start in the Premier League since the game that got Nuno sacked, the Man United game, 2021. So yeah, they'd never started together, especially in... No, definitely. Trying to think now whether they might have started in a cup competition together, maybe, but Premier League definitely not. So you've got all of that going on, and I think he just decided, as is going to be his way, that the best form of defence is attack. Is keep that ball up around the opposition goal, and it should have worked. To be absolutely fair to him, it should have worked. Had his players pulled the trigger on just one or two more of those shots, I think you would have seen a completely different game. And I know Unai Emery and Ollie Watkins, I've seen their quotes after the game. They both came out saying they were lucky to be in it level at half time. And that's the thing. This is where we can criticise, and we'll talk about it, kind of various aspects of the attack and stuff, and that's where it's got to improve. But I wonder whether Postecoglou was disappointed maybe slightly with himself after the Wolves game, because I certainly know, and he said it publicly since anyway, that while publicly he said he was happy with the players' effort in the game against Wolves, he actually privately was really unhappy with the way that the team played, and it wasn't. We said it ourselves. It was not the Postecoglou way of football against Wolves. It was very much harkened back to those Conte games where they were scraping through with backs to the wall performances, and he hated that Postecoglou. He hated it with an absolute passion. Timid, ponderous, kind of really, like I say, more to do with his predecessors than anything that he wanted to bring to the football club. And I don't think that's any shock with that now, and knowing that we saw Eric Dyer and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg drop out of the team. Two senior players who perhaps on the day Postecoglou saw as slowing down some of the football and maybe trying to... I think he said it afterwards, something about sacrifice. What was the word he used after the Wolves game? It was something like... I can't remember what it was, but essentially, the to paraphrase massively, it was players thinking about their own survival. I think that was what he said, something like that, rather than trying to play the football. And, to see two players that were leaders or in the leadership group last season absolutely bombed out just shows you how different this kind of squad has become. He would rather play a makeshift team than go against his principles and play known players. And that's a good thing. I think that is a good thing for the future and going forward. Because he wants to go forward. He really does. And even Postecoglou on the sideline yesterday was absolutely determined to ensure that didn't happen again. He was shouting at Ben Davies, got it a couple of times in the early minutes when he wasn't playing quick passes to either Udogie or Brian Hill down the left. He was... Postecoglou was right in his ear down that side, shouting at him. You can hear him saying, just like, play it, and getting it. And then Davies did that constantly from then on. Who else? Emerson made a sliding kind of block in his box, and Postecoglou did a real kind of double-fisted roar at him to try and keep geeing him up to keep doing that as well. It's interesting with Emerson is that I would say that Dyer's a better passer than Emerson, and I think he can pick out a diagonal long ball quite well as well. However, I think what Postecoglou wanted in that scenario was he wanted obviously the pace in case Ollie Watkins ran over or Kamara ran through at the back. But he also wanted someone that was just going to get the ball and motor forward and give it quickly. And that's not something that Dyer does. So that was why you saw four fullbacks at the back. It was very strange. And we were all in the press room beforehand going like, whoa, this is going to be interesting. And obviously, Dejan Kulusevski in the number 8/10 role as well. It was... And look, there's only one way of looking at it. It should have worked. It should have. I've got the stats for you. Spurs had 18 shots at goal, 8 on target. Emiliano Martinez had to make 6 saves. Spurs also hit the woodwork twice, had 3 Sonny goals ruled out for offside, and also had a penalty claim when Diego Carlos elbowed Brian Hill in the face, which... do you know what? That is the one downside to being at the game. And there's not many. It's obviously brilliant to be at the game, and I've always will say that when you're at the stadium, you get a better view of a match. You get a better view of what goes on and off, happens off the ball, and little things on the sideline. You see loads of stuff around just what the cameras want to show you. But the one thing we don't get is often replays of moments that might have been missed. Some stadiums don't even have replays. And also, we don't know what's kind of being discussed in the background, so we don't know. So the reason I'm saying that is, first off, none of us saw the elbow on Brian Hill until after the game, which was absolutely blatant as well. It was Carlos was not going for that ball. He was just trying to stop Brian Hill getting there, and an elbow in the face. I still don't know, looking back, how that was missed. Although I wonder, and this leads me to the second part of what we had no awareness of in that first half was apparently that the VAR was having issues. It was having an outage or something, and they were struggling to communicate back and forth between the two, between Stockley Park and the match. And I don't know whether it was back in time for that, so whether it just missed even checking that moment. I definitely know it was back in time to rule out Ollie Watkins' effort, the headed effort that went in, but I've looked at that a million times now. Probably not a million, slight exaggeration. But I cannot see how that, if VAR was working, they would not looked back at that. And not only a penalty, it's borderline red card. It's some might even say not borderline. Yeah. So you look at all of that, all of the things that Spurs had, the 6 saves from Martinez, hitting the woodwork twice, 3 Son goals ruled offside. They also had 62% of the possession, played 564 passes to Villa's 324. But ultimately, as we've said a million times, all that matters is the scoreline. And Torres and Watkins scored the goals that cancelled out Lo Celso's effort. So the other thing that's frustrating is the third game in a row where Spurs have been ahead, yet have lost the game. So remember when we were kind of annoyed last year that Spurs would always go a goal behind. And the first halves were often terrible. Whereas right now, Spurs are going ahead and then losing the game. Look, you do have to look at the injury stuff. That is, of course, going to play a part. Losing 8, they had 8 injured first-team outfield players going into it, 2 more suspended, and they lost, sorry, I might have said earlier, 11 out injured. If I did, I meant injured and suspended. 8 injured first-team outfield players, 2 more suspended. Bentancur then went off after 31 minutes. Yet despite all of that, some of the fluidity of the attacking movement was incredible. Honestly, it was something to behold. That was the weird thing, that a lot of Spurs fans, it was 61,679 people, I think, inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium yesterday. Very few of those Spurs fans can have come away thinking, well, actually, that was really entertaining. We got to see some great football. It was a really entertaining game. Obviously, the result should be the be-all and end-all, and I understand that. But actually, in terms of going to a football game and enjoying it, they probably did for the large part of it. And again, it was just about the finishing. And, I know there's some people that will say about it being naive system or gung-ho or whatever you want to call it. But I'm sorry, if you're creating that many chances and restricting Villa to not many, Vicario had to make a couple of saves later on. They had a couple of chances early on. That I think most of it was to do with having a very patchwork defence put together. A lack of height from set pieces was a massive issue, I felt, as well, because you're playing 4 fullbacks. There's no towering centre-backs in there. But I think if you take that into account, all of that into account, I thought Spurs played really well. They did. And, I asked Postecoglou afterwards, I said, how do you sum up a game like that? Because obviously your team has created so many chances, but ultimately you've lost. And he said, the outcome is obviously disappointing. Disappointing for our fans and particularly disappointing for our players, because I felt the players we had out there did a fantastic job playing the football we want to play. On any other day, it's probably a game we win comfortably. It's about those fine margins in football sometimes. I'm not happy with the defeat, but as a manager, when you put a team out there, what you're looking for is some real belief and intent and the team we want to be. And I saw loads of that today. Gio, Rodrigo, Brian all started their first games this season. I think we had 4 fullbacks and 4 wingers out there. I just thought the way the lads handled all of that, there were plenty of excuses for us not to be dominant today against a very good and settled Villa side, but I thought some of our football was as good as we've played all year. We don't get the rewards today and we've got to take the pain of the defeat, but in terms of our progress, I thought if we continue down that road, we'll get to where we want to. I think it was certainly the kind of football was entirely fitting on the day that obviously we discovered that Terry Venables had passed away. 80 years old. If you're not aware who Terry Venables is, obviously former Tottenham manager and player. Won the FA Cup both as a player and a manager for Tottenham. Also England boss. Barcelona boss. He was such a pioneering manager. Australia boss as well. I think there would have been a little bit of crossover with Postecoglou in terms of, I think Postecoglou was in charge of South Melbourne when they were top of the league, while Terry Venables was Australia boss. So they probably would have spoken about various players that played for the national team. And then a couple of years after, the legacy, I guess, of Venables' era, Postecoglou then took over the youth sides of the Australian national setup. So I'm sure there would have been some interactions there. I think he was asked about it by Sky. I think maybe that'll be something that maybe in the press conference on Friday we'll delve into a little bit deeper. But it'd be interesting to know if there was more of a crossover. But I did feel, going back to what I was originally trying to say, it was quite fitting that the football was lovely to watch on a day that we found out a manager who loved such football obviously passed away as well. And personally, for me, Terry Venables, he was kind of the first Spurs manager that I really took notice of. When I was a kid, that was when Spurs were starting to have a resurgence under Terry Venables. And yeah, I still remember kind of watching the semi-final, obviously, with Gaza free kick against Arsenal, and then the final when Gary Mabbutt actually was talking at half-time yesterday and was saying that Venables produced one of the best team talks he's ever had at half-time in that cup final. And he was just saying, look, everything's gone against us. We've had Gaza go off. They scored from the free kick. Gary Lineker missed a penalty. You know, we're still in this despite all of that. And they came back and won it. And it was... He's just, like I say, pioneering, innovative manager. He went abroad. He worked, at home in England as well, of course. I think with Australia, I think he was a goal difference away from taking them to the World Cup. With England, obviously, we know all about Euro 96 and how that was one of the best tournaments we've probably most of us ever watched England play. Some of the football they played as well. So, incredibly sad. He was the one that I think you're always aware of players when you're really young, but started to really take kind of notice of the manager when Terry Venables was in charge. So incredibly sad. And I think I would hope that he would approve of the Postecoglou way. I'm sure he would have. So yeah, I've got some more Postecoglou quotes as well on the game. He said, "Today I think we were so dominant in the game and it was disappointing to concede a goal from a set piece. They obviously looked threatening from crosses. We had 4 full-backs out there, so we didn't really have the height, which we knew would be an issue for us today, but you kind of take those calculated risks with the flip side of it being that some of our football was outstanding today. I mean, some of the goals we could have scored would have ended up being show reels for us in the way we want to play our football. So for me, the positives definitely outweigh the negative of the result." Look, we're not daft. We know that Spurs go to Man City this weekend, which is it's come at the wrong time for Spurs. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare, I think, with the issues they've got, especially in defence. And it's going to be a tough one. They could end up having 4 defeats on the bounce. And we know what some football fans are like, especially in the Spurs fan base. The doom merchants will be warming up their vocal cords, ready to rant and rave and blame everyone. But for me, do you know what? I kind of look at it a completely different way. For me, I look at the fact that despite having 11 first-team players unavailable, an entire team, if you will, out of commission, he still got what was left, and those players who aren't regulars to come in and play the best football of the season. And it's just madness for me, honestly. I don't even know how he managed to do that. And it's just, for me, and when I was talking about this with guests, we were sat there, if they play like that with a team of kind of, I don't want to say misfits, that's kind of sounds really awful, but a team that has kind of been chucked together, square pegs trying to force them into round holes, or round pegs and square holes, I can't remember which way you say it. If he can do that with them, what in the world is he gonna do with a squad and a team that is absolutely fits him like a glove? Spurs are going to be sensational. They really are. I think you have to take into account what's kind of happening right now, and that only really, he should get more praise for it. I do think so. Talk about a little bit about the players out there. I thought it was a really nice little South American connection going on in the midfield to begin with in that first half an hour. Bentancur, obviously his first start for the club since that day at the King Power Stadium in February, all those months ago. I think certainly having seen the way he played against Bolivia for Uruguay as a number 6, I'm sure Postecoglou looked at that and thought, well, do you know what? With his fitness levels, I think to give him that role where there's a little bit less work to do than the box-to-box nature of the number 8s in his system, we'll do that. And obviously with Basuma being suspended, it was a good chance to bring him in for that. And obviously he's playing alongside Lo Celso, who, like I said, hasn't started a Premier League game since October 2021. And obviously then chucking in Dejan Kulusevski in a role that it's not unfamiliar to him completely, but it's not the one he regularly plays or has played under Postecoglou. Yet as a trio, they were excellent. They were really, really good. And that was what was so disappointing with Bentancur going off. Because he dominated that first, half an hour, 27 minutes technically before he got the challenge on him. Challenge in the loosest terms. Just his control of the ball, his passing range, even the defensive covering as well was excellent. He was properly he was blowing at times. He was knackered, but my goodness, he was bringing so much to the quality we've seen from him, and we knew he had. I've got little stats. So remember, it was 27 minutes. Technically came off after 31 minutes, but about 2 or 3 minutes of that in the middle was spent kind of getting treatment. He touched the ball 34 times, made 28 passes with an 85.7% success rate, and he made a lovely kind of ball over the top that Porro should have absolutely volleyed the hell out of that ball, but instead tried to kind of knock it over to Son in the middle, and it got cut out. But Bentancur was just excellent. He also made 1 dribble, 1 tackle, and 1 interception. Then enters stage left, Matty Cash. If you don't remember, Matty Cash was the guy the Aston Villa player who launched into the knee-high challenge on Matt Doherty a couple of seasons back at Villa Park, April 2022. I've got a date down here. Left Doherty out for months with that knee injury. Didn't even get a yellow card that day. It was a ridiculous challenge. It was so high. I didn't feel like this challenge was, how do I put it, it wasn't, it's really difficult to say because it was a bad challenge. It was still a bad challenge. It was a late reckless challenge yesterday, but it wasn't as wild and high and dangerous as I felt that one was that day. But still, it was a challenge that didn't need to be made. There was no need for it whatsoever. Bentancur got away from him. He was behind, and yet he just kind of playing it back in my mind. It kind of caught his shin and his ankle all in the process. He tried to play on, but it just didn't work. And the Spurs players were incensed. All the Spanish-speaking players absolutely kind of gathered round. You had Lo Celso tried to kind of go towards Cash. Brian Hill was going mad as well. Emerson Royale. Christian Romero was on the sideline, standing up, absolutely shouting at them, although slightly hypocritical, I guess, if Christian Romero's having a go at someone for a dodgy, reckless tackle. But we'll come to Romero a little bit later. But he was properly pumped up and incensed. And actually, when the Villa players went down the tunnel at half-time, they all gathered around Cash in like a bit of a circle. I don't know if it was just protecting from Romero or whether it was from anything happening in the tunnel. But he obviously got a yellow card for that. And he had a challenge not long after where it was a bit like, you could have got yourself sent off there. And he got booed every single touch by the Spurs fans. And he was a walking red card waiting to happen. And unfortunately for Spurs, Unai Emery realised that and took him off at the break. But it's so frustrating. I mean, and to do that twice to 2 Spurs players, it's bad form, quite frankly, isn't it? It's a really bad way of playing football. It was just so unnecessary. And yeah, I mean, quotes from Kulusevski on it. He said, "I have to see it again, but Rodri was really angry, and he said it could maybe have been more than a yellow card. It's just hard for Rodri. Unbelievable person, unbelievable player, out for 8 months and comes back after 2 games and gets injured again. Life is hard. He has to stay strong and he has a great family to support him and good teammates. It's very hard because I love him as a guy. He's the guy I want to go to war with, and they take him out like that with a bad tackle. That's life. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, was what incensed the Spurs players so much, was that he's been out of the game for 8 months and he comes back and someone goes and does that on him in a game a couple of games later. It's just, like I said, it's really, really poor. Obviously, Højbjerg came on. Højbjerg, he's a very different kind of player, of course he is. He's not going to bring you exactly what Bentancur brings you, with that kind of calm passing. You know, there was a little spell after he went off where the Spurs players were a little bit like, oh man, we've kind of lost this guy that we know we can give the ball to and not have to worry about it. He's going to find another player. But what I would say with Højbjerg, to be absolutely fair to him, he used the ball quite well a lot of the time, and he played some lovely passes, lovely link-up play, put Sonny away for one of the goals that was just unfortunately called offside, forced Martinez into a save as well, had a really nice curling shot from outside the box, but ultimately he's not going to bring the same attributes to the party as Bentancur is. I asked Postecoglou after the game about Bentancur if he knew like kind of how bad it could be. He said, yeah, I'm not sure. It's his ankle, I think. It wasn't a great tackle. I thought he started the game so well, and I think it was the reason we got a really good foothold in the game. He's such a creative player. It's the last thing we needed, another injury. So disappointed to lose him, but we yet to see the extent of it. So fingers crossed. At the time of doing this, we hadn't really heard any more. Again, as I always say in these scenarios, often they kind of wait until any swelling has gone down so they can do really precise scans on everything. I asked Guesty, who went down to the mix zone where they interviewed the players afterwards, and he said that he wasn't walking out in a protective boot, but that's not really an indicator too much, because I'm pretty sure Maddison, with his ankle injury, didn't leave with a protective boot, I think. I think Guesty said he was just hobbling a bit, Bentancur, so fingers crossed that it really isn't something that we lose Bentancur again for any kind of prolonged period of time, because what a player, honestly. And he looked so ready to be back in that first team setup, the starting 11 again. Such a shame. Who else? Lo Celso alongside him. Lo Celso, look, he's had a tough time this season. He has. Was kind of sold the dream of, by Postecoglou, staying at Spurs, being really in the mix, being the alternative, I guess, to Maddison. And then he hasn't really played much. Yes, he's had an injury problem that kept him out for about a month. That came in the game, the Carabao Cup game at Fulham, which meant he had to come off at half-time in that. But still, you know, when Maddison was having real kind of a collection of knocks and stuff, and they were trying to manage him through games and bring him off towards the end of games, even then, Lo Celso wasn't really coming on for Maddison. And of course, when Maddison did the ankle, you think against Wolves, Lo Celso's going to start. This is his chance, and he doesn't. He doesn't come in at all. And like I say earlier, I think Postecoglou must have felt in that moment a little bit disappointed himself, because he went with the safe option. You know, and I understand, because Højbjerg has played really well this season coming in, and maybe he also deserved it on form, but that was going with the safe option at Molineux, and it kind of had played its part in the result that we saw. So yeah, I think it's been tough on Lo Celso. And I think what was really important for him was on Tuesday night in Brazil, he played 70 minutes for Argentina and played well. And he played a part. He set up the sole winning goal for Otamendi. And to kind of get that 70 minutes, I think, under his belt, just, 5 days ahead of this game, I think Postecoglou played down the international stuff, but I do think it must have surely played a part in terms of his confidence in training, his fitness, his sharpness. And he did everything that Postecoglou asked of him yesterday. He really did. He played 3 key passes, 74 passes with a 91.9% success rate, 100% success rate with 3 long balls, made 4 tackles, 1 interception, went on 1 dribble, had 2 shots of goal, and of course one of them was that lovely finish. It was slightly deflected, but the technique in catching the ball on that half volley was beautiful. So many players we see that. We see the ball come out, we're all like, shoo, and they just send it into the stratosphere. But that was how you catch the ball. And then you are going to have the likelihood of, with a cluster of bodies in front, it can take a nick on the way and deflect past the keeper. But I was so impressed with Lo Celso yesterday. I thought he was excellent. To come in after kind of everything that's happened to him. Look, the guy is up there with Spurs' record signings. When you take into account the loan fee it cost to get him from Betis and the permanent fee they then paid for him not long after, it's getting up there in Tongi Richarlison territory. It really is. But it hasn't worked for him. He spent about 18 months on loan. Like I say, that's why he hasn't started a Premier League game since 2021. So to come back into the fold and put in a performance like that for me I thought he was excellent. I think it was really, it's a real credit to him as well. And we've said this in the past about Lo Celso. If you can get him fit for a consistent period of time, the fact that he's got this real aggression on and off the ball, allied with his creativity, ability to pick out a pass, dribble past players, it's a lovely combination. And especially for Postecoglou, I've got some quotes coming up on why he likes him. And I think it's because he fits so well. He fits the progressive use of the ball. He fits the aggression. He fits the desire to just keep going. And there were so many moments when, a little bit Bentancur-esque, he was just doing these little pirouettes of the ball and they couldn't get near him. He played really well. I hope this is the start of a run now. Postecoglou said about him afterwards, I thought Gio did really well today in the role we had him. He was creative and scored a good goal. He was always threatening and he worked hard. He hasn't played a lot of football. The reality of it is that we're not going to get too many back. We'll get Biss back for next week and we might have lost Bentancur. We only had 6 or 7 on the bench. So everyone who is here at the moment is going to have to play a part. And ahead of the game, in his Friday press conference, he was asked about Lo Celso, and he said, I looked at Gio really well before I got here, both here at Tottenham and his spells at other clubs. You can see he has certain qualities. He's had a disruptive season for us. He's had a few injuries. He hasn't really had a clean run at it. A few injuries is interesting. That suggests that maybe there was something else behind the scenes as well that we weren't aware of. He said he hasn't really had a clean run at it. He's one of a number of players that has happened to, but you can see technically he's a very creative player. He works hard for the team. He'll get an opportunity over the next few weeks to hopefully come in and make an impact. And when he was asked if Lo Celso had been frustrated at his lack of minutes, he said, no, I haven't had an issue with Gio at all. He had a really strong pre-season and then he got injured at Fulham, which was his first start, and that set him back for quite a while. He's working his way back to fitness. I haven't had any issues with any of the players in terms of frustrations. All of them know that they're in the same boat. They work hard at training. They'll get their opportunity when it comes. When it comes, it's up to them to put in performances and play at a level that continues to allow them to be part of it. If they're here, they'll get an opportunity. That's all you can offer. I don't think his national team form is a direct correlation to here, just like anyone else's. Gio will get an opportunity, particularly over the next few weeks, because we're down on numbers and have a fair few games between now and New Year. We won't get anyone back of significance in that time apart from Romero. So Gio and the other guys will get that opportunity. And actually, Kulusevski was asked in the mix zone about Lo Celso, and he said he was so good and he's going to help us. He showed today what kind of player he is, and I expect him to play a lot more now. And he went mad when he scored the goal. He was roaring with delight and punching his fist, and you could see how everyone was so happy with him as well. He's definitely come back. I said this before, like with a bit of a different attitude this season. I think mainly it's probably feeling wanted. And also there's, like I say, there's a big contingent of Spanish speakers as well. But he's really made a kind of a point, I think, of being more of the group rather than just sticking in that clique of South American and Spanish speaking players. So yeah, I was delighted for him, and I hope now, like I say, we see the consistency, because he's had a couple of matches where you think, oh, that's good. This for me was probably one of his best performances in a Spurs shirt. But now it's about building on that with a bit of consistency and yeah, just staying fit. That's the biggest thing for him. Go to Etihad next week. He's scored against Man City. He knows how to score against Man City. So who knows what he's going to do. Third member of that midfield, Dejan Kulusevski. I thought he was brilliant. Honestly, I thought he was superb. I know some of the things he did didn't end up with the goal that they should have. I would say down to others as well, not just his moments. But I thought, in terms of what you wanted from Dejan Kulusevski yesterday, I thought he was brilliant. I gave him my man of the match. I think I gave Lo Celso an 8, and I think I gave Decky a 9, I think. Or was it the other way around? It might have been the other way around. I might have got that completely the wrong way around. But either way, Kulusevski for me, I thought he was so impressive. You might remember I asked him, not the summer just gone, but the one before, about his favourite position. And he told me then, it's a very good question. I've been thinking about this my whole life. I always thought of me being a number 10. I still think I am, but my best results as a football player have always come being a right winger. So I don't know. In the future, we'll see where I'll be. Yeah, I can probably play wing back too. It's football. You want to help a good team. You want to play, enjoy, work hard and have fun. And boy, did he work hard and have fun yesterday. He was just, honestly, he's a Duracell bunny of a player. He really is. You see everyone else flagging at the end, and he goes on some ridiculous pitch-long run. He did a couple of them late in the game, and they just can't keep up with him. There was one player, was it maybe Douglas Luiz, attempted to run and barge him off the ball, and he just bounced off Kulusevski. When Kulusevski is in full flight, he's so strong on the ball. And I felt, actually, we talk about Lo Celso being taking on the Maddison mantle on the role. I actually felt Kulusevski took on that role yesterday in terms of the creativity, the little flicks. It was a back heel to Brian Hill early in the game that, you know, should have brought a goal, but Hill's shot was saved. Loads of little interplay, but also the ability himself to break into the box and make those runs, despite playing in a deeper role than he had been before. He absolutely thrived on it. And I do wonder whether we'll see more of him now, whether Postecoglou's looked at that and just thought, do you know what? Yeah, maybe while Maddison's out, that's the solution. Maybe we play Decky in that role, and it's great news for Brian Hill, I think, as well. And potentially, you know, who knows if he gets a chance, someone like Jamie Donnelly coming into that front three, or Velise as well. But he was just excellent, Kulusevski. He had that big moment himself as well when Son did a really clever flick. I think that was a back heel as well. Kulusevski ran inside, took the ball with him, absolutely turned Diego Carlos inside out, and you're just thinking, just tap it in the net. And he almost tried to be too cute and curled a shot which cannoned back off the left-hand post. And it was one of those where, yeah, if he just even tapped it, it probably would have found its way through, because he was only about 6 yards out. And that was a shame. But it really was, because it would have been just reward for his efforts. Like I say, teed up Brian Hill for that effort as well. He sent another curling effort wide himself. He did a cross into Sonny that Sonny headed just over, I think. Second half, honestly, a couple of real lung-busting runs. One of them, he ended up doing a lovely little 1-2 with Sonny, who played a back heel to him, and he knocked it across goal where Brennan Johnson was like an inch away from sliding it in. Then he went on a run himself, which ended with a shot at the keeper. He was a bit knackered just when he got at the end there. But his stats are superb. He got 6 dribbles, 3 key passes, 1 through ball, 3 shots at goal, an 83.3% success rate from his 24 passes for an attacking player taking risks. And he also chipped in with 1 tackle and 1 interception. And do you know what I think people forget about it? He's 23. He's 23 years old. He's so young. Obviously, he had that burst of brilliant form when he first arrived at the club. I think everyone was like, oh my goodness, he's amazing. And I think they kind of forgot about the fact, and I'm hoping I said it at the time, that look, he's a young player. He's not going to be able to maintain this. There's going to be periods where he's going to dip, and that's when he has to develop and learn. And you know, we talk about him maybe being predictable sometimes, coming in from the right and knowing he's going to go into his left. Yesterday showed absolutely the unpredictable nature of him when he's going through the centre. You don't know which way he's going to go. And yeah, I do think people forget how young he is. I've seen some people kind of criticising his performance yesterday. I was just like, what? I thought he was excellent. Just because others, you know, don't finish his chances, isn't there? Wouldn't I say a couple of weeks back, there's a stat that he created more chances than anyone else in the Premier League or something at one point. You can't help it. He should have assists galore. Yeah, he should do better himself with his own goal output, but he could have assists galore at this point if other people had been more clinical. And he was asked after the game about playing in that role as it's like a quasi 8-10 role. So he had the 8 box-to-box nature, but was also at times would go just ahead of Lo Celso, and it was obviously eventually Højbjerg into a bit of a number 10 role. And when it asked about the role, he said, I felt so good today. I felt like the real Dejan. I felt like myself today, and the coach decided where to put me. I enjoyed it, and I had real fun playing today. It was a great day for me. And he was asked if he can step up in Maddison's absence and take on his kind of creative role. He said, absolutely. I've done it all my life, so it's nothing new to me. Of course, in the second half, I played right wing, but I felt good. Physically, I feel really good, so I'm happy, and I know I'm on the right path to make better, to play better, I think that must be it, and continue to play like this. Yeah, I was so impressed with him. If he keeps playing like that, honestly, and he's so fit, he is probably the fittest, or one of the fittest players in that squad. Yeah, and I always think one of the biggest things you can say about a player in terms of praise is if you take him out of the squad, or the team, take him out of the starting 11, is that team worse off for it? And I think with Kulusevski, the answer is always yes. I think it genuinely is. I think he just brings so many different things to the team on top of everything kind of numbers wise. He also just has that presence about him and that work ethic. Yeah, I thought it was excellent. And so obviously him coming back meant there was 3 ahead of him. Bryan Gil got his chance. I thought Bryan Gil on the whole was positive. He still has that aspect for me of, I don't think we're ever going to get away from it, of obviously being of a smaller stature. It does at times look like a young boy trying to chase down adults who have got the football, and he will bounce off them at times. But I think it's difficult. You've got someone like Luka Modric, who was similar, small in stature, but obviously had a very kind of powerful body, like massive thighs as well. He was so difficult to knock off the ball. Whereas Bryan Gil's not at that stage. But what I would say about him is he's got so much quality on the ball and the ability to shift it very quickly and the guile to get away from players that he kind of does negate a lot of the physical disadvantages he has. That sounds like he's got real physical problems. I don't mean like that. But in the Premier League, it is noticeable. When you have a slight player is probably the best way to put it. But I think he had a lot of quality in various things he did. Like I say, had that big early chance when Kulusevski. It was his reading of it was fantastic. Bryan Gil, he could see that Kulusevski was going to play that back heel, and he ran in behind. He caused lots of problems down the left, and he did a great cross for Sonny as well. Sonny, I just don't think realised how good the cross was going to be, so hadn't kind of flung himself at it. If he had, it would have been a goal. It was a brilliant cross into the middle. Obviously, had that elbow on him as well from Diego Carlos. Postecoglou said afterwards that Bryan Gil handled himself well, was the expression he used, along with Lo Celso and Bentancur as well. I think the partnership with the doggy obviously is new and needs a bit of work. At times they weren't quite on the same wavelength. Doggy actually had a great chance early on with Porro. I'm going to talk about Porro later because I thought he was excellent again. Porro played the ball over the top, and the doggy I think he used his right, obviously his weaker foot, and he touched the ball over the crossbar. But I think if Gil and the doggy can kind of form a little bit of a partnership, that could work in the weeks ahead if he's going to have Kulusevski in the deeper role. It's a big ask for him to go to the Etihad and play again as well. But again, it all kind of hinges on Kulusevski and what he wants to do, and if he wants to continue to be brave and use him in that role, because there's not really another option other than Bryan Gil. I mean, you could put Valise through the middle and put Sonny back on the left. You could, maybe give Jamie Donnelly a start on the left, but that's a big call, obviously. He's a terrific young player, massively in form, of course, in the 21s, but that's a big leap to go from not getting any minutes to suddenly starting the game. I think Bryan Gil just probably did enough to get himself another shot. And Valise is still a kind of a bit of an unknown quantity. I do think he needs more minutes at the end of the game to kind of build up his adaptation to the English league is probably the best way to put it. Who else in that front three? Brennan Johnson had some really nice moments. There was one moment when he absolutely motored down the right, beat his man, but couldn't quite get the ball into the middle. Like I say, had that big sliding moment where he couldn't quite get on Kulusevski's ball across. There was Sonny again. Sonny was very creative. Didn't touch the ball much, but when he did have the ball, he either had it in the net or he was setting up others. It was really difficult because I couldn't really give him a really high mark because, he didn't really see enough of the ball. But actually, when you analyse what he did with it, he was quite efficient. And one of those moments, again, was finding Brennan Johnson, who took a lovely touch and shot, but then Martinez denied him really well in kind of like a one-on-one moment. I think with Brennan Johnson, it's just about improving his productivity in the final third. He got his first goal at Molineux for the club, and I think there will be more to come. Again, another one who's going to get a lot of game time. If he can stay fit, his pace is a real asset because Porro, for instance, knows that if he knocks that ball over the top, Johnson's off like a shot. And I guess the good thing about Hill coming in is that it puts Johnson back onto his maybe more natural right-hand side, and he can be a real danger going down there as well. So, and Sonny, talking of Sonny, like I say, 3 goals, you've always got to say, disallowed for offside. They were all offside, to be fair. VAR did get those right, but it's about touching the ball, I guess. It's just Spurs don't get him the ball enough. And like I say, when he does get the ball, he does good stuff with it. So I think it's clearly an area of the game that needs to improve. I looked at the stats. Sonny only touched the ball 32 times in the entire 90 minutes he was on. Johnson only touched it 39 times. But for a little bit of context, Brian Hill touched it 64 times. So double the amount of touches that Sonny had. And even Bentancur, he was only on the pitch for 31 minutes in all. He only played about 28 of those. And he touched the ball 34 times, so more than Sonny. And actually, Brian Hill, those 64 times, he was only on the pitch for 70 minutes. So it's about being clinical, I guess, with your touches as well. Ollie Watkins only had, I think I've written it down here, 26 touches of the ball in his 91 minutes, but obviously scored the winning goal. And we've seen Sonny do that against Arsenal. I think I remember saying then he barely touched the ball and he ended up scoring, was it 2 goals on the day? So, I'm not worried about Sonny at all because it's about the service to him. If he gets better service and those balls that went into him when he was offside, partly, yes, he could have held his run ever so slightly, but I think it's also about the timing of the ball. Højbjerg's one through to him when he finished with a lovely trademark Sonny curling finish. I think if Højbjerg just hit that split second quicker, that's probably where the offside actually came from. So, look, Tottenham's attack, it's the one area that still hasn't clicked yet in terms of finishing. But it is, when you look at the fact that they haven't got Maddison, that was the biggest thing for me. You haven't got James Maddison, but that was probably their best creative performance of the season, maybe. They created so many chances. Haven't got Solomon, haven't got Richarlison, haven't got Perisic. So the options aren't there. But actually, I was looking at some of the club stats as well. So it's a very statty one, this video. But I kind of did a lot of digging among the stats. And Spurs obviously have only scored 20... I say only. They've scored 25 goals in the 13 games so far. And that's only, though, the 7th highest tally in the Premier League. So, again, for context, Villa has scored 31 goals. But if you kind of drill down to that a little bit more, Spurs have had 210 shots on goal this season. Only Liverpool with 225 and Man City with 214 have had more. So Man City, who obviously right up there, have only had 4 more shots on goal than Spurs this season. Villa, who are in 4th in that little mini table of shots, have had 194. And Arsenal, obviously we know are top of the table right now, have only had 189 shots at goal, which obviously shows their more clinical edge to their game. And also, you look at shots on target. Spurs have had 77 shots on target, which is joint second in the league. City have got 93, so obviously more on-target shots, but Brighton are the joint second with 77 as well. And I think probably the key stat that I found amongst those, Spurs have missed 20 big chances so far this season. 20 big chances. You just add half of those in, and Spurs are probably top of the table. Probably even a quarter of those, and Spurs are top of the table. And I think it is the one thing that really, despite all of the injuries, despite the other issues, it's the one thing that's still got to fully click for Spurs. They're being creative. We saw that yesterday, creating lots of chances, having shots, but it's just about other people joining in with Sonny in the goal scoring and getting more output in terms of goals from the rest of the team as well. It could be that January transfer window, there's a time when it gets remedied, that they maybe bring in someone else who's a bit of a finisher. It could be that Richarlison, free of any of his pain that he's been having in his pubic bone, maybe he'll come back a player ready to score some goals. But like I said, never really been a prolific striker, has Richarlison. The other thing I was going to talk about was, of course, the bench. So you might have noticed Postecoglou named 2 goalkeepers on his bench and only 6 outfield players. He didn't even fill the 9 allocations on his bench. So how do I put this? It's become commonplace, let's say, in football, particularly at Tottenham Hotspur in recent years, to send the old message to the chairman with what you do with your bench. Sometimes it can be that the manager doesn't even make a single change, a single substitution in the game, as if to say, well, what I've got there isn't good enough. You need to give me better options. The other kind of side of it is putting 2 goalkeepers on the bench. The other third way is not filling your bench entirely. Postecoglou went for the latter 2. So he named Fraser Forster and Brandon Austin both on the bench and only had 6 outfield players alongside them, 2 of which were teenagers from the academy who haven't even played a Premier League or a first team minute yet. And the other one was Alejo Velis, who obviously has only turned 20 not too long ago. I remember Conte doing similar once, and he was asked why he didn't just call up under-21 players. And he said at that point, because he didn't want to disrupt their... I think they had a match coming up, which is somewhat ironic because he liked to disrupt the under-20, or he didn't normally have any concerns about disrupting under-21s. But for Postecoglou, there was no such kind of similar excuse, really. The under-21s didn't have any match at all. They had kind of almost like a fortnight off after the international break. I think maybe they're playing Man City as their next game. It might be the same as Spurs. I don't know. But from what I understand, a handful of the under-21s trained with the first team ahead of the game as well. But only Donnelly and Dorrington were eventually named in the squad. So, yeah, and I understand the argument from, there's why not just pick one of them to give them that experience, just in case it comes back later down the road. It helps them that they're going through motions that they're familiar with and experience that they know and being in that first team environment. And that's what leads me to think that this was the old cliched message to the chairman, message to the board, message to those who sign the cheques, whatever you want to call it, because otherwise you just put another player on the bench. I'm sure we'll ask him about it. Someone will, if not someone else, on Friday at the press conference. It wasn't really... He was asked about the subs after the game, but it was a bit... Yeah, it wasn't kind of in the same vein. It was more about having the 2 keepers on the bench. I mean, he could have even, talking about keepers, he could have even put Hugo Lloris, the lesser spotter Hugo Lloris. He could have had 3 goalkeepers on the bench. Stick Hugo up front for the final minutes. But yeah, it did feel a little bit like look at how ravaged my squad is. Look at what I'm having to do, and the players who don't even maybe fit the system, I'm having to use them. Although I would say, I think everyone can see that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous what's happened to his squad. I mean, I looked on the Spurs first team squad page on their website. There's 29 players shown on that first team squad page. I counted them. 11 were unavailable due to injury or suspension, and obviously it became 12 as soon as Bentancur went off. And of course, you can understand Lloris, who just isn't part of first team squads. He's there in training, but it's almost like he doesn't exist when it comes to matches. So that meant that after that Bentancur injury, once he'd left the pitch, Postecoglou had just 13. I'm so worried that I sometimes say Pochettino rather than Postecoglou. It's so similar. Postecoglou had just 13 available outfield first team players at his disposal. 13. That's ridiculous. Senior players. So it doesn't That's what I mean. It doesn't really need to like, oi, Daniel, look at this, you mug. It doesn't really need that. It's like we can all see it. It's just, and I guess some people will say, "Oh, you've got a really weak squad." That's what the problem is. It's actually kind of, it's not that in its entirety. In that, I think if you take 11 players out of any football squad in that Premier League right now, even I'd say Man City's, if you took 11 first teams, maybe Chelsea got enough, although they've had their injury problems. But I think if you take 11 out of most squads, they're going to suddenly look paper thin. What I would say about Spurs' squad, it's more that it's thin in certain areas, and that's a problem. So we knew going into this, after the transfer window was closed, that the centre-back was going to be an option. It was going to be a problem if there were any injuries, because that was a wafer-thin area. We also knew that the creative playmaker area, there was pretty much was Maddison. You got Lo Celso and Kulusevski, we know that now, in kind of seeing them, but in terms of that's the area, I guess you could say. You've only got two natural players to play there, with Kulusevski is, he'll say, maybe that is his natural role. That's areas that have to be kind of fixed, I think, as soon as that January window's open. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's Postecoglou just saying, get on this now. You've got Johan Lang doing the planning and everything behind the scenes, and he'll give his say on who he wants out of the list that they provide and stuff. And I think it's very much, I guess the message is, we need to do this. We need to get our ducks lined up in a row. We need to get these going. We need to tell these selling teams that, look, we want your players to get yourself sorted out now with a replacement, if you're happy to sell him, obviously. And I think it's very much there's so many players that are going to come back from their injuries either after the January transfer window or late into the January transfer window. It's not a case of January the 1st, everything's fixed. So you've got to have players lined up to come in quite early in that window, rather than the classic Spurs, let's wait for a bargain at the end. And he spoke about he said, with the injury list we've got at the moment, we can only really look at one game at a time, or even a day at a time, because we've got 10 outfield players out at the moment of our senior list. This was his Spurs play interview. We'll see how Bentancur is, but we only really get Biss back next week, and hopefully the week after we get Romero back. But the rest of them, we don't expect them to be back pre-Christmas. So all of these things are challenges. But if the lads keep showing the same intent they did today, we'll get through this period and we'll come out a stronger team. So one small mercy of the Spurs fans is, you might have been listening to those quotes and thought, Pat Matasar, what? But I think, from what I understand, that Postecoglou just forgot to mention him. So he's not among those who aren't going to be back pre-Christmas. He should be back within that time frame. Whether that means he's available or not for City remains to be seen. Obviously had a problem that meant he couldn't train after coming back from Senegal duty. So, but from what I understand, he's not part of he won't be back this year kind of thing. So hopefully sooner rather than later. And the fact that he was a doubt rather than definitely out before the game, and I know he wasn't in the squad, maybe suggests that you might see him in a week's time, or at the worst, is it West Ham after that? And the other thing, obviously, about the January, thinking about that, and even thought about that, is you've got the Africa Cup of Nations and the Asian Cup. So you've got Basuma and Sarr, who we've just spoken about, and Sonny, of course. Actually, on Pat Matasar, it is Pap. It was meant to say Pap. And Ange Postecoglou keeps calling him Papi. But everyone within the Spurs tells me it's Pap. Not that I'm correcting anyone on the pronunciation of anything. I'm a little bit right Romero there, aren't I? Shouting from the sidelines at someone doing a bad tackle. And obviously, if you're not aware, the Africa Cup of Nations and Asian Cup, they're roughly the same period of time. Africa Cup of Nations is from January 13th to February the 11th. Asian Cup from January 12th to February the 10th. So you just know that it would be absolutely in line with the current lack of good fortune at Spurs that, Senegal, who were last year's winners of the Africa Cup of Nations, Mali and South Korea all have really long runs in the two competitions. that's another reason I think that you need to get bodies through the door, especially maybe in attack. You look at that and you're losing Sonny, and suddenly your attack looks quite light. I think it should have. Actually, that's interesting. He did say. I didn't even think about that. He said no one back pre-Christmas, but then he did say Richarlison would only be a month. So I wonder if he's forgotten him as well. Richarlison, with the international break, was only expected to be about a fortnight or so after the break. So that's one. I'll ask about that. Maybe I'll ask about that on Friday, actually, if we to look into that a little bit more. But on the transfer window, he was asked ahead of the game about that. He said, I guess the challenge for us is all the injuries came at once, so it hasn't been staggered. In terms of January, the planning is well away with that. Johan Lang has come in, and he called him just Johan, has come in and he's leading that in terms of all the background work. My involvement will be sort of ramp it up to it as we get closer in January, and understanding exactly what our requirements are at the moment. Although work has been done in the background with Johan leading it, and he's brought in some people to help him in that area. We know that's Rob McKenzie and Frederick Leth as well. And he said, we'll work with him when the time is right. Look, Postecoglou said it a million times. He said he'll need multiple transfer windows to make the squad his own. But I think even without the injuries, this January one was going to be one where he was going to have to make adjustments and bring a few more faces, a couple at least more faces that would be Postecoglou players into his setup. I know there's been a suggestion of a lack of money because of the spending last summer, which you do have to unfortunately include making Kulusevski and Porro deals permanent. That is part of that. Again, still no indication as of yet. I'll do my check that I always do on Company's House. That remaining 50 million of, nothing's still on there, of the ENIC £150 million capital increase hasn't been taken yet. I've asked the club again. I asked them earlier in the year, and they confirmed to me that the commitment was carried over into 2023 for that remaining £50 million. I've had nothing yet, despite asking, to suggest otherwise, that's changed. I have put in the question, but I haven't heard anything back on that yet. And you'd think if it wasn't the case anymore, that would be made clear, because I guess the club don't want to be seen to having money that they don't have to spend. But then maybe it works the other way, that you don't want to be seen to have any money. I don't know, it's all gamesmanship in football, on and off the pitch as well. But look, the be-all and end-all is Postecoglou needs new recruits. He does, because it's clear that he's already worked out that certain players just aren't going to fit his system. Hugo Lloris clearly is one of them. It's not even just fitting the system, it's just not going to be a part of things going forward. And Eric Dier seems to be similar going forward. He's the only available senior centre-back at the club. It was dropped to the bench. And like I said, Postecoglou would rather play an entire defence of fullbacks than play, an England international in there as well. In the end, I think having that all of them didn't work in the end. It would have, I think, had they, been more clinical at the other end. But ultimately, because they weren't, the deficiencies of that backline were shown up. Like I say, in the air, Ben Davies lost Pau Torres for the first goal, and then Emerson Royale just was really flat-footed as Ollie Watkins just ran past him. It was a good little interchange, the move, but what I would say, it was far too easy to kind of carve Spurs apart in the middle. If you're not going to score the goals at the other end, and yes, the defence is going to struggle, you've got to keep the ball at the other end of the pitch. And 4 fullbacks, I don't even know if that's happened before. I think we've seen centre-backs playing as fullbacks. I know Pep likes to do that at City, but to actually see the reverse, to have 4 fullbacks, that's really difficult to say, 4 fullbacks playing, you could kind of see the issues it was going to have. He was actually asked about Dyer and why he took him out of the team. He said, "I'm just looking for some balance there. Obviously, with Watkins and Diaby in there, both very good players and direct in the way they play, I thought we could handle it fairly well. I thought we did for the most part. Obviously, they got through for the second goal, and that was disappointing. I just thought the way we set up today was to try to be dominant in the game in terms of playing through what we knew was going to be an aggressive line they had, and I thought we did that well." So it'll be interesting to see now whether he sticks with that, or whether Dyer comes back in because of the aerial ability, I guess, of Erling Haaland. Because let's be honest, Haaland up against that back four is going to have a field day with anything coming into the air, into the box in the air. So that might see him brought back in. But again, obviously, you then know Dyer is going to have more of an issue with balls over the top. It's a difficult one. I mean, whoever is going to be in it, Matt Wells, the defensive coach, has got a full week now to drill what they can expect from Man City. It's just the thing about City that worries me. It's just the quality they have. They've got so many. You've got Doku, you've got Grealish, and that's just pretty much on one side as well. They've got so many attacking options up there that can come at you. That's the game that I'm not looking forward to going up to that one as well. It's almost like I just kind of want to get that. If I could fast forward and get past that, then I think there's a run of games that. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Mopping up anyone I haven't mentioned. Destiny, Doggy, like I say, actually first Vicario made some really good saves. He actually made his first mistake, really, that I've seen from him. He had a shot, I can't remember who it was, I think it might have been Leon Bailey. Had a shot and he let it squirm a little bit between his fingers. It ended up hitting the post, coming back, hit him on the back of the leg, but rather than bouncing into the net, just kind of stopped. And Vicario picked up and kissed the ball. It was a real kind of praise the Lord moment. And it was the first time I've kind of seen him look a little bit like, ugh. But to be fair, he still pulled off. It was about 2 or 3 really good saves as well. Couldn't really do it. Both goals were quite point blank. Watkins, actually both. Torres' header was excellent and Watkins' finish was superb as well. Doggy, definitely you can see the balance to the back four suddenly when he comes in. They look so much better going forward. Decision making is still a little bit iffy at times. He's obviously a very young player. Sometimes when he's at the back, he makes a little bit of the wrong decision, and also when he's going forward, sometimes he picks out a ball that isn't the right one. For me, like I say, out of the fullbacks, Porro was superb. I thought Porro was excellent. I saw a stat today that Pedro Porro has now got 6 assists because he got an assist for that Lo Celso goal because the ball went all the way through. He's got 6 assists since he joined Spurs at the start of this year, and in the same period this year, only Trent Alexander-Arnold and Kieran Trippier are the only defenders to have got more assists than him. I thought that was very good. His stats for the day: Porro played 4 key passes, including that really superb one to Udogie early on. He got the assist for Lo Celso's goal. He also had 3 shots at goal, hit the left-hand post, won 2 aerial duels, made 1 tackle on 1 interception, and he slung in 10 crosses and 8 long balls with an 84.8% pass success rate from his 59 attempts. I think weirdly we kind of looked at Porro before Postecoglou came along, and we're a bit like, oh, how's he going to fit in as a right back? But having seen him since, he is the perfect Postecoglou right back. He really is, because he's a playmaker who happens to be a right back. He plays the ball, such lovely balls. He's so creative. He knows what to do with the ball. Yes, his defending, of course, can improve, and it will, I think. But on the whole, Postecoglou is probably one of the first names on the team sheet right now. Pedro Porro, he's playing that well. So yeah, I think I've covered everyone pretty much there. The substitutions, there wasn't really too much to make of it beyond Højbjerg. Skip and Valise kind of came on late in the game, and I think Skip had a couple of... That was a chair creaking, by the way, not me doing anything iffy. Skippy didn't do too much. It's a difficult one, It's one of those scenarios where you're kind of bringing him in to play in that number 8 role, whereas I do wonder, we still haven't seen Skip play in the number 6 role, which is his natural role. I'm intrigued to kind of see how he would work in that. But yeah, that's one of those where maybe it's difficult because the kind of decisions they were making back then. Because he brought on Skip for Kulusevski. So he brought on Skip for Hill, and then Kulusevski went up front, if I remember correctly, back into his right wing role. Whereas maybe you wonder if you'd wanted to be really brave and go for it, maybe you leave Kulusevski where he is and maybe bring Jamie Donnelly on to play on the left-hand side instead of Brian Hill. But again, maybe it's just a case of Donnelly's got to earn his trust. It could well be. So yeah, City up next. Oh, it's just come at the wrong time. That's my issue with it. This could have been earlier in the season, or it could have even been in, let's say, February. And I just think it's such a bad time to play City. I feel like City are starting to kind of find their feet. I think, yeah, they've had the odd hiccup, but also for Spurs to go there with a makeshift defence is just scares the life out of me. And Basuma will be back, obviously. Romero won't yet. And I do think Romero has to really look back on this period of time with a lot of reflection, I hope. Because ultimately, if you wanted to, you could blame all 3 defeats on Christian Romero. You could. Because I think, and obviously the Chelsea game could have gone in a different direction in terms of whether Udogie got sent off, if Romero didn't like the whole butterfly effect thing. But I think even with 10 men, I think if Spurs had Romero on the pitch, I think they get something out of that game against Chelsea. I think at Wolves, I don't think Spurs, the way Wolves weren't particularly that impressive on the day, I think Romero's in that team. It also influences the way Spurs go forward as well because he's more aggressive and he likes to push the ball forward quickly. And I certainly think they would not have lost against Villa. So I do think he has to bear a lot of the kind of the burden of responsibility, I think, for those 3 games, even though he wasn't on the pitch. Yes, of course, like I say, they could have put the chances away and that's how Spurs could have or should have avoided defeat yesterday. But I do think Romero, I'd hope Postecoglou would think that way because he just left a huge hole in the team, not only in terms of his ability and personnel, but also his leadership. He was this season showing to be a real leader at the back and a real galvanising force there. And suddenly he took that all away with, let's be honest, 2 moments of madness against Chelsea. Yeah, such a shame because he'd been near faultless before that. That's what annoys me even more about it, I think. Yeah, so trip to Etihad. It's going to be a different Spurs, of course. We know Spurs are their bogey team a little bit, City, but that was a Spurs team that was happy to sit back and counter. It's just not the Postecoglou way. It's just not. And I think that's the issue for me, is that I don't think Postecoglou wants his team to play that way, even in moments like that, because I think he said this before, even doing that, regardless of the result, it will be abandoning the principles that he wants them to stick to in the toughest of moments in other matches. And if he says to them, we can only win by sitting back against City, he's telling them that his system actually isn't the way forward. And that's why they're going to have to do it. So it could end up, especially with the amount of money City have thrown into some wonderfully expensive quality options up front, it could be a bit of a nightmare. I'm hoping and praying that next week's video is not going to be like that. It's going to be me going, well, that was a surprise. But I just kind of feel like it's one of these maybe where you just have to take the hit. It is as much of a free hit as I think Spurs are ever going to get. Massive injury problems, a makeshift back line, a midfield that's kind of got a completely different look to it. Attackers who are the only attackers you could pretty much play. Does he go safe? Does he bring in Højbjerg for either Lo Celso or Kulusevski? After the Wolves game, that seems a bit of an odd way to go. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you bring him in and push Kulusevski into the role and Hill comes out? And it's really difficult because even that in that itself is slightly abandoning your principles, I guess. But maybe he feels he might need Højbjerg just for the battling tendencies and the ability to cover when they are pinned back a bit. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think the team should be against City. But like I said earlier, I do think we're in that period that the Celtic fans saw of knowing the football is much better, knowing the direction you're heading in, but also being aware that it's part of a process and the construction of it all is going on in the background. It's going to bring these iffy ones. I like the fact that Postecoglou saw the Wolves result, Wolves performance, the performance against Wolves, and knew that he couldn't allow that to happen again. I like that he also identified that quite quickly. And like I say, I do think the fans are there with the club still at the moment. I think that is obviously helped by the first 10 games of the season. Maybe Spurs fans, had it happened right at the start of the season, maybe they'd have been a little bit less amenable to it. But the fact that they've seen Spurs playing so well and getting results, they know that, okay, this is a bit of a blip and the injuries are so bad, they'll get back to that. And actually, Kulusevski said after the game about the fans, I really hope they stay with us. I hope, because we will win in the future if we continue like this. It's important that we stay together. Everybody in this club and outside is not important what everybody else says. I think inside, everyone needs to have a positive energy and help us players, because we will bring the fans happiness. Postecoglou as well, he believes Spurs will get through this sticky period and come out stronger the other side. He said, it is just a situation we're in at the moment, but we'll get through it. It might take a little while, but we'll get through it. And as long as we show the same intent and play the football we did today, I've got no doubt when we come out the other side, we'll be a very good football team. I wasn't happy with the way we played at Wolves, so that's a different performance. Again, it's not a game we couldn't have got a result from, but it was not something I was pleased with in terms of the progress we need to make. Today is different. I thought today we played that game again, and we keep playing in that manner. When we do get everyone back, we're going to be a pretty good football side, as we've already shown. We've just got to make sure the players stay focused on what's important right now, and you need to win games of football to help us to keep yourself in the mix, to be in a strong position come the end of the year. But right now, we're still building a side. What's more important is the way forward has to be with what the end goal is in mind. And today was about trying to play the football we want to play. If we fell short, we fell short. But I didn't think we fell short today. I thought it was just fine margins for us and not getting the rewards. So, yeah. And I agree. I agree with all of that. I think we can see where Spurs are heading. If they play the football they played yesterday, on any other day, they're winning that game. The goals are going in. They're not going to miss that many chances again. Hope. And also, when it comes to January, I also hope that the clubs see that this football is going to bring success in the weeks and months ahead. And with that likely added 5th Champions League place, again, speculating to accumulate. You help him make sure his squad is ready for the second half of the season. And I think Postecoglou takes you into the Champions League, and then maybe then some. You know, maybe you finish in the top 3 or something if he can get a run together. Because I genuinely believe, looking at those fixtures, that was what I was kind of alluding to earlier. I think if you get through this City game, I mean, straight after that, I've still got it on the under-21s. It was Man U, not Man City that were playing. You look at those fixtures after the Man City game, and yeah, there's some tough ones in there, but it's a run where they could, they play that kind of football. They can put a bit of a charge together. You got West Ham and Newcastle at home in successive games in about 3 days. That could be a test of the squad, but you will have Romero back, and like I say, you'll have Basuma back. And fingers crossed you'll have Sarr back. Who knows? We'll find out with Bentancur whether he's going to be back. Then you've got Forest away, Everton at home in quick succession as well over the next week before Christmas. And then you've got, after Christmas, Brighton away and Bournemouth at home. So there is that little run, I think. And in January, in terms of the Premier League, you've only got the trip to Old Trafford against, obviously, a Man U side that are they're squeezing out some wins at the moment, but they're vulnerable. And you've got Brentford at home as well. So, yes, there's difficult tests in there. Again, I keep going back to it. Spurs played the football they played yesterday with added quality in their numbers as well and added quality in their finishing. I think they win. I think they go on a little bit of a charge again. And then that takes you, you're suddenly into a February where you've got Everton, Brighton, Wolves, Chelsea, Palace, Villa again, Fulham, Luton. February and March aren't horrendous until you start to get to that run of games we know very well is coming up in mid-April into May. Ooh, Newcastle, City, Arsenal and Liverpool all in a row at the moment. So yeah, that's why I'm not tearing my hair out at this moment in time, because again, I can see where it's going. And I know this feels weird to say that after 3 defeats in a row, which could be 4 after the game at the Etihad next weekend. But yeah, I don't know. There's something brewing at Tottenham, and you can just kind of feel it for a change, which is quite nice. Before I go, I'm going to do a little loan roundup as well. People often ask about that, and I've got that all to hand this time, so I can tell you very quickly what's happened with a few of the players. There's 8 players out on loan, if you're not aware. Tanguy Ndombele, some positive news on Tanguy. After the kind of recent issues, he'd kind of had a groin injury. There was reports of a bit of a bust-up with the head coach there over having a burger one night after a game, and also just generally, I think, not meeting the physical requirements they wanted at Galatasaray. But good news, at the weekend he played his first full 90 minutes for Galatasaray. Only his second start, they won 4-0. And he had some good stats on who scored, who gave him a database player rating of 7.05. And probably more important than all of that was the Turkish media outlet Milliyet reported that he had a positive special meeting with the head coach Okan Buruk during the international break, and also put in extra work on the training pitches during that period as well. And I like this bit. The outlet reported that Ndombele appeared extremely enthusiastic in training and his performance was increasing day by day. I love that. It's like someone's watching him. So now apparently Buruk had that meeting with him and told him that essentially, you do that, you keep up that high level, you're going to play a lot of football, and you're not going to head back to, they're not going to find a way to send him back to Spurs in January. Although I don't know if that actually exists. I don't think there's a recall clause in that. I think they would have to negotiate it. So yeah, some positive news for Tanguy, which is good. Good for him. Another positive one, Troy Parrott. He is smashing it at Excelsior Rotterdam right now. I feel like the last couple of months he's just really pushed on to another level there. He's got 4 goals and 2 assists in his past 8 matches in the Eredivisie. On Saturday, he got a goal and assist in the 4-2 Derby defeat at home to Feyenoord. I've watched extended highlights of it. He plays well. He's right up there, up front. His first goal was a really nice kind of low left-footed shot past the goalkeeper after he'd actually missed a similar-ish effort just before. He kind of rushed it a little bit, and then he played a really nice, clever pass into the path of Lazarus Lampro. But unfortunately, Feyenoord ran away with it. They've got Santiago Jimenez up front, who is just smashing it. He's got I think 16 goals in the Eredivisie this season. But Parrott's creeping up there. I looked at the charts. He's up there. I know he's only got 4, but he's only 2 behind Steven Bergwijn, who's got 6. He's on the charts. That's the main thing. If he scrolls down, he can see himself on there. But yeah, keep an eye out for Troy Parrott. Obviously, one that's kind of gone into the background when it comes to Spurs. But he's doing very well for himself. And he's starting to get the goals, and that's the big thing. And he's forced his way into the starting lineup. He started the last 3 or 4 games in a row. And I think Spurs had people watching him as well at the weekend, and they won't have, they'd have been impressed with what they saw, which is good. Who else? Joe Rodon. Leeds had a kind of a bit of an iffy result. They drew 1-1 at Rotherham, obviously struggling in the Championship. Joe Rodon has been smashing it at Leeds this season. Leeds fans want him to stay. I think Leeds would be mad if they don't try and make that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs even looked at the possibility of trying to bring him back in January with the issues that Spurs have got, or if there was any kind of recall clause. A little bit more of a difficult game for him against Rotherham, but I've seen 2 different kind of takes on his performance. I've seen Leeds Live gave him a 6 and said that he could have done a little bit better in the build-up to the first half equaliser for Rotherham. But I've also looked at some of his stats, and they were really good. He kind of won a lot of the contests. He won 9 of his 10 contests that he had, including all 4 battles on the ground. Made 5 clearances, 3 tackles, 2 interceptions. Pass success rate of 93% from his 117 passes. So, yeah, he's having a cracking time with Leeds, and good for him. He's 26 years old now. I don't know where that time's gone. Jed Spence is almost back from his knee injury, so that's good news. Daniel Farker said that he needs to just do a little bit more training. Obviously, he's been out for 8 weeks, needs a little bit more training, and then he'll be ready to kind of be in contention. Wasn't quite for that game. A few more days of training, he said. Reguilon didn't play at the weekend. He was an unused sub. Obviously, Luke Shaw's back from injury now, so how much game time Reguilon may have. I mean, they've got a Champions League game at Galatasaray. Galatasaray. Reguilon up against Tongi and Davinson Sanchez again. You'd imagine Shaw, maybe having been out for a while, coming back, might not start straight away again on Wednesday night after playing yesterday. So maybe Reguilon gets some more game time there. But I think there's an option for the loan to be looked at in January, and I do wonder whether he ends up going somewhere else because of the lack of game time. But he's done okay there. You know, he's been a bit mixed performances, I think, is what I keep hearing. There's a little period where he was playing quite well, but yeah, the people that cover Man U have kind of told me, yeah, it's a bit like he was at Spurs. He could do some very good things. He could do some things you're like, why have you done that? Jeffet Tanganga, it feels like he's almost back. He's had this knee issue that meant that he hasn't been able to even play a game for Augsburg yet, the Bundesliga side. He did start and play the first half of a friendly during the international break because Augsburg only had 6 of their squad on international duty, so they played a friendly against, I've got it here, SSV Jan Regensburg in a friendly. They won 5-2, and yeah, Jeffet Tanganga played the first 45 minutes, but then wasn't in the squad for the first game back after international break against Union Berlin. So we have to see whether that is just that he still needs to be built up or not. Jeffet and that knee, I think that knee it's always been a little issue for him. I hope he gets some game time because ultimately he's not going to get the move to Augsburg if he doesn't. They're not going to take up that option, which I think has various kind of inbuilt things where it will be quite easy for it to be triggered, but it's not going to be easy for it to be triggered if he's not going to play the games. Who else we got? Dane Scarlett. He only got 7 minutes from the bench as Ipswich lost 2-0 at West Brom. That's quite a rare kind of defeat for them. They've been very good this season. He had a couple of late efforts at goal, but he couldn't turn it around. Actually, Guesty did a good piece this week. Have a little look on his Twitter feed. He spoke to one of the people that cover, I think it was a reporter that covers Ipswich week in, week out, to ask about Dane Scarlett. I think the gist of it, if I remember correctly, was that the fans haven't seen enough of him to be entirely convinced yet. And I do wonder whether it's one of those where both clubs look at it in January and just think, yes, there's positives to be had from being in a team that's flying high and the need to come in and perform every time you play, but also do you get to the point where you just do need some game time? So I wonder whether he ends up going to another team in the Championship, maybe slightly lower down the ladder. We'll see. Alfie Devine, in the week before, had won the Player of the Round award in the Carabao Cup fourth round. He scored a lovely goal. He played the full 90 minutes as Port Vale lost 2-1 at Shrewsbury. He's had a cracking time at Port Vale. Bit of the opposite, really, to Dane, in that he's got 3 goals, 3 assists from midfield. He's played 18 matches and he's got more than 1,090 minutes to his name. So, yeah, all very good for Alfie, and really good development-wise for him as well. So that's the loan roundup. That's all 8 players. I'll try and do those as much as I can, obviously. Sometimes it's about kind of getting all the information together in time, because it's a fair bit of checking in how they do, because you can't just really look at whether they played and what the score was. You've kind of got to delve a little bit deeper into it. In an ideal world, I'd love to go and watch them all playing each week. I'm going to try and get to some loan games this season. I've told myself, especially with Spurs not in Europe, there should be some free midweeks maybe where I try to go and get to a game, especially if it's a local one, maybe an Ipswich game, or if Port Vale or Leeds are playing down this way, we can get to go and see those players. I'd love to go and watch Troy play for Excelsior Rotterdam. That'd be great. I love the Netherlands. Or Jaffet in Augsburg. Probably less likely to go and see Sergio Reguilon at Man U because, there's not really a reason for me to go and watch other Premier League matches. But there you go. God, we covered plenty there. So I hope that people don't take too much kind of a morale drop from that, albeit a third defeat in a row. I hope, it's difficult. Social media is not the best barometer because I saw some people having a massive moan about the game. I saw some people say, you can see Postecoglou's now struggling. But then also kind of on the trains back, listening to people, went from Northumberland Park back, the general mood was about how many chances Spurs created and how well they did in an attacking sense and how I guess they kind of threw it away in that aspect, which I think is better than saying what we would have been saying after many of the games last season and the dreadful performances and dreadful results. Because that was a world away. This is not that. This is some iffy results from good performances. And that will change, especially as the players seem to have bought in. If you're going to play that way, even in the circumstances that they had yesterday, then I think that way has been bought into. And that's a big thing for Postecoglou as well. And it seemed to be what he was saying in his post-match comments. All right, we're going to head off now. If there's any major stuff in the week, obviously I'll do an update. Otherwise, probably be Monday again because it's another Sunday game and a long train journey up there and back. I'm not looking forward to it. I never like trips to the Etihad. It's a bit similar to going to the Emirates in terms of I don't enjoy the games. They're always ones where you're kind of watching it through kind of clenched eyes or your hand in front of your face. Oh no, hold on kind of thing. And especially I feel like this time with the issues Spurs have got, it's going to be one of those. But I'm hoping I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm hoping we all are. But again, it's kind of like, it's getting past that. Let's get past that game and then look to what comes next. And as players start to return as well. And just Spurs get a bit more clinical, please. Please, creating so many chances, that's great. Put them in the net. Right, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of my Monday evening. And same to you. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. And I shall catch you later. Goodbye.